My name is Rob Arnold. I'm Superintendent of Schools in Amherst County, and I want to welcome you to our Roadmap to Return Town Hall. Um, I want to thank you for taking your time to listen and to be a part of this, as it's very important to our community, and want to make sure that we get the information out to who we need to. So I have a screen shared, so I hope that everybody can see my screen, and I'll lead you through this. But
Need some more chips. I got a whole lot of dip for her.
uh, before we get started, one thing that I want to do is I want to thank some people for their efforts in the last 3 months. So March 13th, our world changed completely. Educationally, things got turned upside down, and families had to rethink how they were going to provide education. Our teachers had to completely learn a new way of teaching, and it was quite a hardship on everyone. So I'd like to thank our staff in Amherst County Public Schools for their selflessness and their dedication to doing what was necessary to make sure that the students' academic needs were met. I also want to thank our maintenance folks and our bus drivers and our school nutrition folks, because they kept our students fed. This time, I believe we have well over 80,000 meals delivered since March 13th. So that is a great thing that was happening while the students were not in school. I'd also like to thank the community. You guys have been excellent throughout all of this. You've been patient with us as we're kind of learning as we go. We're building the plane as we're flying it, and we appreciate you being patient with us, showing us grace, allowing us the room to figure things out, and also supporting us. So I just want to tell everybody thank you for what you've done. We still have a long way to go, but I want to thank you for what you've done so far. I'd also like to share with you that 18 months ago, we had a town hall. We had 2 town halls, and we were discussing what this community wanted from education. And at each town hall, we had between 15 and 20 people, and most of those people were our staff members. So we are closing in, I think, about 300 on this call right now. I understand the circumstances are different, but I also think it shows that this community cares about education. You want to be a part of this. We want to hear from you. And so I think that this is going to be a great event for us as a community. So when we put this out on Facebook to invite people to this meeting, got a lot of responses very quickly. And those responses ranged from, I don't want my child to come back to school until there's a vaccine, to the other end of the spectrum, you can have our child tomorrow if you want our child tomorrow. And then there were a lot in between. And so that's a wide range of opinions and beliefs about this. And so what I thought would be important before we started is to maybe agree upon some things that we have in common. I believe that everybody on this call wants our students back in school. I think we believe that school is the very best place for our students. I think that's where the best learning happens, whether that's academic learning, whether that is getting emotional support, social learning. All of those things happen better in a school with an adult in front of them. So I think we all can agree that school's the best place for our students, and we want them back. All of our staff wants them back. The second thing I think we can agree upon is that safety is number one. Safety is going to be a priority. It needs to be a priority. Our students and our staff need to remain safe. The third one that I have listed here might be a little controversial in that you might not agree with what the governor's guidelines are, but I think we have to agree that as a public institution, Amherst County Public Schools is a public institution that accepts public dollars. Because of that, we are bound by what the governor, his guidelines and his restrictions. So whether you agree with those restrictions or not, we have to understand that we have to abide by them. So I want those things to be in place before we start this conversation. So if I want to go back to the why of this, just real quick, what we're going to do, I'm going to talk about the information that I know, the most up-to-date information I know about returning to school. And at the end of my conversation, what we're going to do is we're going to send all of the members on the call into breakout rooms of about 10 people. There'll be a facilitator in that breakout room, and we want to hear your thoughts, your concerns, your needs, questions that you might have. We want to hear those things because we understand that whatever plan we put together is going to impact all of Amherst County. And therefore, we need to hear from Amherst County. And so that's the goal for today's event. Okay, so let's talk a little first about the Roadmap to Return Task Force. Month or so ago, the state of Virginia, the Virginia Department of Education, put together a task force that was going to work on returning to school issues. There were about 100 people on that state task force from across the state. I had the honor to be on that committee. Dr. Brown, the principal at the high school, and Holly Jennings, who is the director of compliance, or the supervisor of compliance and discipline. Holly Jennings was on that as well. So Amherst County was well represented. There were 3 folks from Amherst County out of 100. And so we were able to have a lot of input there. And so we worked on a plan for about a month, and that plan has been finished. What happened with that plan was it went to the governor's office, and the governor is using that plan partially to develop his own plan for the return to education. And so that document, though, was made for all of the schools in the state of Virginia. And as you are well aware, Virginia is very diverse. We have Fairfax County, we have Wise County. Those school systems don't look anything like each other. And then we have a lot of different ones in between. And so that document is pretty general. It's pretty broad. It gives a lot of guidance and direction, but it doesn't speak to Amherst County's specific needs. And so what I did about 3 weeks ago is I stood up a committee called the Roadmap to Return Task Force here in Amherst County to take that document, take that state document, and to take the governor's guidelines and to work on a plan that was specific to Amherst County Public Schools. So our document is going to guide us as we come back. And so it's made up of about 70 people, and we have community members, we have business leaders in our community, we have parents, we have teachers, we have counselors, a lot of people on those committees that are going to help us make some decisions and develop a plan to return to school. We have 6 areas that we're really focusing in on. They are academics, social emotional learning, operations, finance, human resource, and of course I'm missing one. I'll remember it soon. But so those are the things we'll think about and we'll work towards, and our plan will take in those areas. And so the timeline for development that we are using is we hope to finish by That's right. Someone help me out. Thank you, Josh. Technology, because obviously technology is going to be a big part of this. As you are well aware that we've been working with technology the last 2 months, 3 months. I want to talk about the timeline of this plan. Our hope is to complete our work by early July. I would like to take this plan to our school board in early July for them to approve the plan so we can start to implement the plan. And so our objectives for this document. So we want to develop a document that outlines our return to school. All of the things we want to think about here is going to be based on the safe, equitable, and effective return to school. We want to make sure that we really focus on safety and equity. And we have a member of the task force that is looking at the entire document through the lens of equity. And so what that means to us is that we have a lot of students, for example, that don't have reliable high-speed internet. And if we are doing things that require students to do work using the internet at home, that's not equitable. So we have to make sure that we meet the needs of all of our students. And so we're going to have to plan for that. And so that's what I mean by equitable there. We also, I mentioned the comprehensive plan that we started about 18 months ago. We have completed that, and we certainly don't want the closure of school and the 19 to derail the work that we did last year. And so part of the objective of this document is to align it with our comprehensive plan. So in essence, these are the things that we want to do with our task force. So number one in this plan is safety. And so I want to talk a little bit about safety. Amherst County Public Schools has the moral responsibility to our students and our adults to keep them safe. There's a physical safety, obviously, that we have to address. We don't want our students to get sick. We don't want them to take illness home and get others sick. And so we have to address that in this plan. But we also need to meet the emotional needs of our students. And so one of the things that we've done is we are making sure, last week we had a professional development week for all of our staff here. And we asked all of our staff members to go through training on things like trauma-informed care, techniques to deal with students that are having emotional difficulties, because we realize that that's going to happen as students will have not been in a structured environment with other students and teachers for about 5 months. And that's going to be difficult for our students. So when we return, one of the things that I've asked our staff to think about is that I don't think that we should be jumping into academics and getting right back to where we were on March 10th, driving towards an SOL test and making sure that you got all of your academic work done. Because if we don't take care of the emotional needs of our students, then the academics are not going to be successful. So we're going to spend time early on when we return dealing with and trying to build back that sense of community, that sense of relationships in our classrooms and in our buildings. So that's the emotional safety that I'm talking about. Aside from our moral responsibility, we also have a legal responsibility. We have to follow the safety guidelines that the governor, the CDC, and the Virginia Department of Health put in front of us. And so here's some things I think that we need to start talking about in terms of what some of those guidelines are. So we don't have the governor's plan yet, and I'll get to that here shortly, but we have seen the CDC's guidance for returning to school, and we know what the Virginia Department of Health is saying about a safe return to school. And so the number one thing that they mention as far as mitigation strategies is social distancing. So what that means to schools is, how do we keep our students distant from one another, keep them apart from one another? And so I put a picture on our screen here that this is of a classroom. This is a normal sized classroom in our schools, and each of those desks has 6 feet in between them. That classroom now has 12 desks in them. We typically have 20 to 24 desks in a classroom in a full class. So I think that you have to start to prepare yourself with the understanding that our classrooms are going to look different, and that if we abide by the restrictions and the guidelines that are given to us by the CDC, we're not going to be able to have our students, all of our students, in school every day. We're going to have to figure out how we're going to maximize our space and our time with students in the classroom, but then we're going to have to figure out effective ways to give our students distance learning opportunities. We also are going to be required to deal with student and staff screening. I don't think that's going to be temperature taking or thermal scans or anything like that, but I think there's going to be some verbal screening that we're going to have to do to make sure that we don't allow students or teachers in that are ill or are becoming ill. We're going to have to make sure that we have the appropriate cleaning supplies, the appropriate hygiene supplies for our students, hand washing stations, disinfectants that we're going to need to use every day after our students leave. And then we'll need to be able to provide face coverings. I don't know specifically what the governor is going to require as far as face coverings, but I do know that it will probably be a part of his plan. And so those are the things that we are going to make sure that we address in the safety portion of this plan. So I've talked a lot about the governor's plan. And so the governor's plan, we expected the governor's plan to be released Tuesday of this past week. That got preempted by some other announcements. Then we expected it to be today, and that got preempted by some other announcements. So our anticipation is now Tuesday, but his plan is done. His plan has taken the big task force plan that the Virginia Department of Education worked on. It's using guidance from the CDC, and it's using guidance from the Virginia Department of Health. And I put this up here because I do know this much about his plan, is that it's going to resemble his phasing plans that he currently has in place. So so for example, we're as a state in phase 1. And so in phase 1, there are certain restrictions and guidelines that we have to meet to be in phase 1. To get to phase 2, we have to meet certain criteria. And once we go into phase 2, there's a different set of guidelines and restrictions. So I do know that when he puts out the education plan, it's going to follow a similar phasing model. So if tomorrow, for instance, we know that the governor is going to put us in phase 2 of the back to the businesses and the churches and those kinds of facilities, he's putting new guidelines on phase 2. So when we get our document, there'll be our phases. And so how that phasing is going to work is that it's going to be based on his criteria. So data in the state on health, the testing that's being done for COVID-19, he's going to look at data that shows the prevalence of cases, the prevalence of deaths due to COVID-19, and he has a set of criteria that is going to determine when we move into phases. So do not think that there are going to be specific dates that we're going to point to. So for example, our school calendar says we start August 12th. Well, if we're not in a phase from the governor's model that allows us to be back in on August 12th, it's not going to happen. So we have to follow the governor's phasing plan. Let me give you an example of what the phasing plan looks like in terms of how we're dealing with it right now. So in phase 1, a lot of us had shaggy hair, right? We were unable to go to the barbershop or the salon because those were the restrictions in phase 1, before phase 1. During phase one, we then moved into where we could make an appointment to go in. We had to wear face coverings, and there was a limited number of people in the barbershop or in the salon. So if you think about it from that perspective, when we start dealing with school, there are going to be certain restrictions and guidelines that we have to meet in order to come back into classes. So I put some other information in here that one of the other requirements for the school system is that we're going to have to be able to meet those requirements from a preparedness point of view as well. So what that means to us is if we're required to have face coverings for our students and our staff, we're going to have to obtain the appropriate amount of those items: PPE, sanitizer, what's our distancing capability. So when we are coming back, we can only go into certain phases when we show the state that we are ready to do that. So we're going to have a plan, and that's what our task force is going to do, is develop these plans that shows the state that we can meet their guidelines and their requirements. So our hope is that on Tuesday, that his phasing plan is put out for education. We hope we don't get bumped to another day because we believe that every minute that is wasted waiting for the governor's plan is a waste for our task force to accomplish what they need to accomplish, because this is very important work that we have, and it's a great deal of work that we have.